The state of Missouri has the 8th largest incarceration rate in the country. And tonight we begin a look into the criminal justice system and how corrections is preparing individuals for release. In this courageous conversation, Life Behind Bars, Dr. Brian Calfano begins our series exploring how one case that happened in California 50 years ago could have shaped where the criminal justice system in the country is today.
It's hard to believe, but 50 years ago tonight, Hollywood starlet Sharon Tate, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, and 3 others were brutally murdered here at 10050 Cielo Drive in the Hollywood Hills. And 50 years later, you can see that the property looks a lot different. But what's remained has been the legacy of these stories and these murders. And this legacy reaches all the way to Missouri because the Manson murders forced a national reckoning over crime.
Manson killed the 60s.
University of California law professor Hadar Avram studies the Manson murders and their impact on the nation's criminal justice system.
You know, this idea that the hippies were all about love and light, and this was all this, innocent revolution to free us from the constraints of convention. All of this takes a very dark turn with these murders, and they come to symbolize essentially the end of the 60s.
It might be tempting to think of the criminal justice system as a sentinel of stability. But how the public and politicians view crime, punishment, and rehabilitation is not constant. And Avram says fallout from the Manson murders helped usher in change.
The 60s is pretty much the only time in the history of the United States where the people that oppose, there's more people in the United States that oppose the death penalty than people that support it.
Beyond the death penalty, public perception shifted in the 70s and 80s to the idea that to keep heinous crime at bay, it was time to get tough on criminals and throw the book at them, even when the crimes in question weren't anywhere near as severe as the Manson murders. This chart shows the number of prisons has more than doubled since the 1970s, and the 1980s ushered in mandatory sentencing guidelines for various crimes that made punishment one size fits all. The guidelines contributed to a 500% increase in the number of incarcerated persons since the 1970s. But 50 years on, the Manson legacy of harsh punishment for offenders now meets with a new Missouri reality.
The state was looking at having to build 3 new prisons over a very short period of time, which would have cost $500 million. And obviously there isn't $500 million in the Missouri budget to do that.
Molly Gill is vice president of the Washington, D.C.-based Families Against Mandatory Minimums. She says the need to rethink sentencing in the Show Me State is a matter of having the punishment better fit the actual crime.
Parts of the reasons the prison population was growing was that a lot of people were going back to prison for violations of probation and parole. Often these violations weren't new, serious crimes, so we were putting a lot of people in prison for very low-level infractions.
That Governor Mike Parson and the state legislature reformed Missouri sentencing laws this session means almost 200 additional prisoners will be released from state institutions in 2019. And that has us wondering, how prepared are these prisoners to deal with life beyond bars? Our latest Courageous Conversation will show you the opportunities and challenges facing those about to re-enter a society that is starting to rethink its reaction to the 50-year Manson murders legacy. Brian Calfano, Ozarks First.
Brian, we'll have a look at how the Missouri Department of Corrections works to prepare prisoners for life beyond bars when our Courageous Conversation series continues Sunday night at 10 o'clock right here on Color 10.